Hey guys, tonight we are stepping back across the threshold of 2 millennia to find you not as a hero in a marble statue, but as a groggy teenager in the beating, chaotic heart of ancient Rome. Imagine opening your eyes to the sight of a cracked plaster ceiling just inches from your nose, while the golden Mediterranean sun struggles to pierce through the thick, humid haze of the world's first true megalopolis. You aren't in a palace, you're in the Subura district, tucked away in a tiny, overpriced room on the fourth floor of a rickety apartment block called an insula. The air is a symphony of roasted grain, unwashed wool, and the unmistakable pungent tang of the city's open drains. I've got to be honest with you. Between the crumbling wooden stairs and the fact that people in the upper floors literally toss their morning business out the window into the street below, you probably wouldn't survive a week without a modern tetanus shot and a pair of noise-canceling headphones. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is in your corner of the world. Drop a comment below so I can see our global community growing. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lie there for a moment on your narrow cot, which is essentially a wooden frame strung with itchy hemp ropes and topped with a mattress stuffed with dry straw. Every time you shift, the straw crunches loudly, a rustic reminder that you're sharing your bed with a few hundred very ambitious bedbugs. It's barely 6 a.m., but the concept of sleeping in doesn't exist in a city that runs on sunlight. Outside your thin shutters, the street is already screaming. You hear the rhythmic clack clack of iron shod cartwheels on basalt paving stones. Carts were actually banned during the day to prevent traffic jams, so the delivery drivers spend all night and early morning making a racket that would put a modern construction site to shame. You roll out of bed, feeling the cool, slightly damp mosaic floor beneath your feet. Well, if you're lucky, it's a mosaic. More likely, it's just packed cacio pesto, a mix of broken tiles and lime that's surprisingly sturdy, but definitely not comfy. You don't have to worry about picking out an outfit, which is a blessing for any teenager. You reach for your basic linen tunic, a simple t-shirt shaped garment that reaches your knees. There are no buttons, no zippers, just a simple wool belt to cinch it at the waist. If you're feeling particularly fancy or if your father is a citizen of standing, you might have a stripe on it, but for now, you're just trying to find your sandals in the dim light. The room is tiny, maybe the size of a modern walk-in closet, and the walls are decorated with graffiti left by the previous tenant. Mostly crude drawings of gladiators and some very creative insults about a local baker. There's no kitchen here. The risk of fire is so high in these wooden insulae that cooking is practically a death sentence for the whole block. Historians actually debate how often these buildings collapsed or burned down, with some suggesting that being a Roman landlord was basically a game of how high can I build this before physics wins. You grab a small clay lamp, though you don't light it. Oil is expensive, and the sun is doing the work for free now. You head toward the window, which is really just a hole in the wall with a wooden shutter. Peeking out, you see the neighbors across the narrow alleyway doing exactly what you're doing. There's a woman hanging laundry that looks suspiciously gray, and a man shouting at a stray dog. The smell hits you again, a mix of wood smoke from the thousands of small braziers and the aroma of the Tiber River. It's a sensory overload, yet strangely grounding. You feel a grumble in your stomach. No cereal, no toast, just the anticipation of a piece of bread so hard you could probably use it as a weapon. You realize that to get anything done today, you need to navigate the vertical maze of your apartment building, dodging the neighbors and the stray cats, all while trying to remember your Greek verbs for the grueling school day ahead. You're young, you're in Rome, and the world is terrifyingly, beautifully alive. As you step out of your room and onto the narrow landing, you have to be careful. The stairs in an insula are notoriously steep and uneven, often made of wood that has seen better centuries. You pass the third floor neighbors, a family of 6 crammed into 2 rooms, and you can hear the sizzle of a small charcoal brazier. They're breaking the fire codes, but when you're hungry, Regulations feel like a secondary concern. You reach the ground floor where the atmosphere shifts. The ground floor is where the wealthy live, or where the shops are. The ceilings are higher here, the air is cooler, and the walls are painted with vibrant frescoes of birds and garden scenes. It's a stark contrast to your straw mattress upstairs. You step out onto the street, and immediately the scale of Rome swallows you. This isn't the pristine white marble city you see in movies. It's a technicolor riot. The walls are covered in red and black paint, announcing upcoming games or political candidates. Vote for Caecilius, one sign says. He brings good bread. It's practical, it's loud, and it's surprisingly familiar. You weave through the crowd, feeling the vibration of 1,000 conversations. You see a group of soldiers in their heavy wool cloaks, their hobnailed boots ringing out on the stones. You see merchants from Alexandria with skin darkened by a different sun, selling spices that make your nose twitch. A fun little fact that most people forget: Rome didn't have a formal postal service for civilians. If you wanted to send a letter to your cousin in Neapolis, you basically had to hang around the city gates and find a traveler who looked trustworthy enough not to use your parchment as kindling. It's these little inconveniences that make you realize how much of a Roman teen's life was spent just waiting and walking. You're heading toward the Forum, but first you have to survive the morning rush hour, which involves dodging a runaway pig and a very angry mule carrying amphorae of wine. You catch your reflection in a polished bronze mirror at a silversmith stall. You look. Okay. Your hair is a bit of a mess, but the messy look is accidentally trendy when you don't have running water in your bedroom. You think about the day ahead. School, the Forum, maybe a trip to the baths if you can scrounge up a copper coin. The city is a predator, but it's also your playground. You take a deep breath of the dusty, salt-tinged air and start your trek toward the teacher's stool, wondering if today is the day you finally master the difference between a dactyl and a spondy, or if you'll just end up with a sore thumb from a poorly aimed stylus. The sun is higher now, hitting the tops of the temples on the Capitoline Hill, turning the limestone into gold. It's a new day in the Eternal City, and you're just one small, sleep-deprived part of it. You finally reach the school, though calling it that might be a bit of an overstatement. In Rome, unless your parents are incredibly wealthy and have hired a private tutor, usually a highly educated Greek slave who lives in your spare room, you get your education on the street. Your classroom is literally a rented corner of a public porch, or pergola, separated from the chaos of the main thoroughfare by nothing more than a thin, dusty curtain. You see your teacher, the Ludi Magister, already sitting on his high-backed wooden chair, looking like he hasn't slept since the reign of Augustus. He's a stern man with a Greek accent and a very long birch rod, which he taps rhythmically against his palm. It's a sound that guarantees you'll stay awake, even if your brain is still back on that straw mattress. You take your seat on a hard stone bench, balancing a wooden tablet coated with dark wax on your knees. There are no desks here, just you, your fellow groggy classmates, and the relentless noise of a blacksmith hammering iron just 3 doors down. You pull out your stylus, a sharp metal tool used for scratching letters into the wax. If you make a mistake, you use the flat, blunt end to smooth the wax over, the ancient Roman version of Control-Z. It's a slow, methodical process that makes every word feel heavy. Historians actually debate how many Roman teenagers were truly literate, but for a kid in the city, being able to read the graffiti and the price of grain is a survival skill. Today, you're practicing the alphabet, but not the easy way. You have to chant the letters forward, then backward, then in pairs, in a rhythmic drone that competes with the fruit seller outside shouting about the quality of his figs. A, B, C, X, Y, Z, Z, Y, X. It's hypnotic, and in the heat of the morning, it feels like a lullaby designed by a sadist. If your mind wanders for even a second to the gladiator match scheduled for tomorrow, thwack, the birch rod hits the bench right next to your hand. Your teacher isn't interested in your creative process. He's interested in rote memorization and discipline. The curriculum is surprisingly narrow. You spend hours copying maxims, short moralistic sayings that are supposed to make you a better citizen, but mostly just make you a bored teenager. Labor conquers all. You scratch into the wax, thinking that right now, Labor is mostly giving you a cramp in your thumb. There's something strangely peaceful about the repetition, though. In a world without digital distractions, your entire universe shrinks down to the tip of that stylus and the smell of the warm wax. You hear the scratch, scratch, scratch of 10 other students doing the same, a lo-fi soundtrack to the Roman morning. One of the weirdest parts about Roman school is the math. Have you ever tried to do long division with Roman numerals? It's a nightmare. Try dividing CCCLX 8 by 14 without losing your mind. To cope, you use an abacus, or more commonly, a complex system of finger counting that looks like you're cast a magic spell. You're moving your pinky and ring finger in specific joints to represent tens and hundreds, a silent language that every merchant in the city speaks fluently. It's a reminder that Rome wasn't built on just legions and stone, but on thousands of teenagers sweating over complicated arithmetic in the shadows of a porch. Around mid-morning, a pedagogus, a slave whose job is to escort the wealthier kids to school and keep them out of trouble, brings a snack for his ward. You watch with a mix of envy and mild amusement as the rich kid nibbles on a pastry while you try to ignore the hollow echo in your stomach. You realize that in Rome, school isn't just about learning, it's about social standing. Every time you stumble over a line of Homer's Odyssey, you're reminded that the Greek language is the ultimate status symbol. If you want to be anyone in this city, you need to speak the language of the people your grandfathers conquered. As the lesson drags on, the teacher begins to tell a story from history, the kind of story meant to inspire Roman virtue. He talks about Mucius Scaevola, the man who stuck his right hand into a fire to prove his bravery. You look at the small brazier nearby and decide that while you're brave enough to face a Roman Monday, you're definitely not stick your hand in a fire brave. You share a look with the boy next to you, a kid named Marcus whose tunic is perpetually stained with ink, and he rolls his eyes. Some things never change. There's always a disconnect between the legends of the past and the reality of being 15 and wanting to go play ball. The air in the pergola is getting thicker as the sun climbs higher. The dust kicked up by passing chariots settles on your skin, mixing with the light sweat of concentration. You realize that your wax tablet is getting soft from the heat, making your letters look a bit wobbly. You try to smooth it out, but it's a losing battle. The teacher, sensing the collective exhaustion, finally grants a brief reprieve. You stretch your legs, feeling the blood return to your cramped feet, and look out into the street. The city is now in full swing. A group of sailors from Ostia walks by, laughing and smelling of salt and cheap beer. A priest of Isis passes in white linen robes, his head shaved and gleaming in the sun. It's a parade of humanity, and for a moment, the dullness of school fades away. You're a student, yes, but you're a student of the greatest city on earth. Even the grumpy teacher seems to soften for a moment, looking out at the chaos with a faint, tired smile. He knows that soon you'll all be part of that machine. Soldiers, merchants, or maybe even the guys writing the graffiti on the walls. But for now, you're just a kid with a stylus, trying to remember if piety has one T or two in Latin. You take a deep breath, the scent of parched earth and distant cooking fires filling your lungs. The rod taps again, not out of anger this time, but as a signal to return to the world of Homer and Virgil. You pick up your stylus, find a fresh patch of wax, and prepare for the final hour of drills. The rhythmic chanting begins again, a low hum that vibrates in your chest, steady and certain, like the heart of Rome itself. Now that the morning lessons have wrapped up, it's time to deal with the most complicated piece of technology in the ancient world, your wardrobe. Since today is a formal occasion, perhaps a family sacrifice or a visit to a patron, you can't just stick with your basic tunic. No, you have to wear the toga. If you think putting on a fitted sheet is difficult, imagine trying to drape 6 meters of heavy semicircular wool around your body without using any pins, buttons, or zippers. You're standing in your small room holding this massive pile of fabric that feels like it weighs more than a small goat, and you're already sweating. To be honest, unless you have a dedicated slave whose entire career is toga folder, you probably look like you've been caught in a very expensive fishing net. You start by throwing one end over your left shoulder, letting it hang down to your shins. Then you wrap the rest behind your back, under your right arm, and across your chest, tossing the remaining bulk back over that same left shoulder. There's a specific fold called the umbo that's supposed to look like a stylish pocket near your waist, but yours looks more like a lump of forgotten laundry. The toga is essentially a giant I am a citizen sign, but it's also a physiological nightmare. It's heavy, it's hot, and it restricts your left arm so much that you're basically a one handed teenager for the rest of the day. Historians often joke that the Romans stopped expanding their empire not because of the barbarians, but because it's impossible to conquer a forest while wearing a wool rug that keeps sliding off your shoulder. As you walk down the stairs of the insula, you have to use your right hand to hitch up the hem so you don't trip and tumble into the street. Um, the toga was never meant for comfort. It was meant for gravitas, a Roman word that roughly translates to looking very serious and slightly annoyed. You feel incredibly out of place as you step into the muddy street. One splash from a passing cart and your expensive white wool, which was bleached using fermented human urine, a fun fact you try not to think about too hard, will be ruined. You see a group of other teens near a fountain, also wearing their toga pretexta with the purple border, and you all share a look of mutual suffering. You're all walking with a stiff, awkward gait, trying to maintain your dignity while praying that a gust of wind doesn't turn you into a giant kite. There's a common misconception that everyone in Rome wore a toga every day. In reality, most people hated them. It was the ancient equivalent of a three-piece suit in a humid subway station. You see workmen in simple, practical tunics looking at you with a mix of respect and glad that's not me pity. You adjust the bulla around your neck, the little locket you've worn since you were a baby to ward off evil spirits. It's made of gold if your family has money, or leather if they don't, and it's the symbol of your childhood. You'll wear it until you officially become a man, but for now, it just bounces against your chest as you navigate the crowds, a constant reminder that you're still under your father's thumb. You notice an old man sitting on a stone bench, his toga perfectly draped in folds that look like they were carved by Michelangelo. He watches you struggle and gives a slight, knowing nod. There's a certain social language to the toga that you're still learning. How you hold the fabric can signal your mood, your status, or even your political leanings. If you let it hang loose, you're relaxed. If you tuck it tight, you're ready for business. Right now, your toga is signaling, I would like to be in a swimming pool. You realize that being a Roman citizen is a full-time job that requires constant maintenance of your public image, even when the wool is making your neck itch like crazy. The heat of the sun is starting to bake the wool, and you can smell that faint, sharp scent of the ammonia used in the cleaning process. It's one of those weird historical truths. The most sophisticated people in the world walked around smelling slightly like a public restroom because it was the best way to get stains out of white fabric. You find a bit of shade under the portico of a temple and take a moment to readjust. You use your right hand to wipe the sweat from your forehead, careful not to disturb the drape of the sinus, the large fold of fabric that hangs across your knees. You feel like a walking sculpture, but a sculpture that really wants a snack. You see a group of girls walking by, their stolas vibrant with dyes made from crushed snails and saffron. They look much more comfortable than you, though their hair is piled so high with curls and pins that it's a wonder they can keep their balance. You try to look cool and sophisticated, leaning against a marble pillar, but the toga chooses that exact moment to slip. You catch it just before it unravels completely, turning your cool guy pose into a frantic wrestling match with a blanket. One of the girls giggles, and you feel your face turn a shade of red that would rival a senator's stripe. The toga is a burden of the soul, your father always says, but you're pretty sure it's just a burden on the shoulders. As you prepare to leave the shade and head toward your father's house for the afternoon rituals, you take a deep breath. You straighten your back, lift your chin, and try to channel the inner strength of Romulus. You might be a sweaty teenager in a heavy rug, but you are a Roman sweaty teenager. The city hums around you, a sea of white wool and colorful silk, and for a fleeting second, the itchiness doesn't matter. You are part of the spectacle. You step back out into the light, one hand holding your dignity together and the other waving to a friend, ready to face the world, or at least the next 3 blocks, without tripping. After the wrestling match with your toga, your stomach starts to make noises that are frankly louder than the merchants in the street. You haven't eaten since that dry crust of bread at dawn, and in Rome, breakfast is a blink and you miss it affair. You head toward a thermopolium, which is basically the ancient version of a corner deli or a fast food joint. These places are everywhere because, as we established, cooking in your wooden apartment is a great way to meet the gods prematurely. The shop is open to the street, with a large marble counter containing deep circular holes where big clay jars or dolia sit nestled in the stone to keep the food warm, or at least lukewarm. It smells like a mix of lentil stew, roasted leeks, and a very suspicious amount of vinegar. You lean against the counter, trying to look like a sophisticated man of the world despite the fact that you're still adjusting your toga every 30 seconds. You order a pullum numidicum, a piece of chicken seasoned with dates and honey, and a cup of mulsum, which is wine sweetened with honey and spiked with spices to hide the fact that it's probably one step away from becoming salad dressing. The shopkeeper, a man with a stained apron and a surprisingly jolly disposition, slides a terracotta plate toward you. You eat with your fingers because in the first century, forks are something people won't really bother with for another 1,000 years or so. There's something strangely satisfying about the sticky sweetness of the honey against the saltiness of the meat, even if you're sharing the counter with a mule driver who hasn't washed his tunic in a fiscal year. A fun little fact that might make you lose your appetite. Romans didn't have sugar. Everything was sweetened with honey or defrutum, which was grape juice boiled down in lead pots. Yes, lead. Historians still debate how much the Roman Empire's decline was accelerated by the fact that everyone was basically sipping on heavy metal infused syrup. You try not to think about your brain cells as you take another sip of your wine. The Thermopolium is a social hub. You see a group of gamblers in the back corner, hunched over a game of dice, their voices hushed because gambling is technically illegal except during the festival of Saturnalia. But in Rome, illegal usually just means don't let the urban cohorts catch you. You finish your meal and wipe your hands on a piece of bread, which you then toss to a stray dog waiting hopefully by your feet. You feel a bit more human now, the sugar rush from the honey giving you the energy to face the midday heat. The sun is now directly overhead, turning the white marble of the nearby temples into blinding beacons of light. This is the time of day when the city traditionally slows down for a siesta, but for a teenager with errands to run, the quiet hours are just a myth. You walk over to a public fountain, a massive stone basin fed by a nearby aqueduct, to wash the honey off your fingers. The water is ice cold and tastes of limestone, the lifeblood of the city flowing through miles of sophisticated engineering just so you can have clean hands. You notice a group of younger kids playing near the fountain with walnuts, tossing them into a jar in a game called Delta. It reminds you that just a few years ago, that was you. Now you're expected to care about politics, the price of grain, and how to properly address a patron. It's a weird middle ground where you're too old for toys but too young to have any real power. You watch the water splash against the stone and feel a sense of peace. The noise of the city becomes a background hum, like a distant ocean. For a moment, you aren't a student or a citizen in training. You're just a kid in the sun, enjoying the simple luxury of cold water in a hot world. As you turn to leave, you spot a vendor selling garum, the infamous fermented fish sauce that Romans put on literally everything, including fruit. He's got a small jar open, and the smell is potent. It's like 1,000 anchovies decided to have a party in a salt mine and then forgot to leave for 3 months. You decide to pass on a refill for your pantry and head toward the forum. You've got a long walk ahead, and you need to make sure your toga stays relatively clean if you're going to be seen in the heart of the Republic. You take one last look at the thermopolium, where the shopkeeper is now arguing with a customer about the price of lentils, and you smile. It's messy, it's loud, and it's probably giving you lead poisoning. But it's home. You finally arrive at the Roman Forum, the place where the world's heart beats the loudest and immediately you're hit by a wall of sound and heat. Imagine the busiest airport terminal you've ever been in, then add a few thousand people in heavy wool rugs, some stray cattle, and a dozen politicians screaming at the top of their lungs. This isn't just a square, it's a high stakes theater. To your left, the Temple of Saturn glints in the sun, housing the city's entire gold supply. And to your right is the rostra, the speaker's platform where the greatest orators of the age try to convince the mob not to riot. You find a spot leaning against a cool marble pillar of the Basilica Julia, trying to look inconspicuous while your eyes dart around, absorbing the sheer scale of the power on display. Honestly, if you were to stand here today with your modern sensibilities, the combination of political tension and the smell of several thousand unwashed bodies would probably make you want to faint. So before we dive deeper into the gossip of the forum, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is in your corner of the world. Drop a comment below so I can see our global community growing. Now, let's settle back into the hum of the city. The Forum is the ultimate filter bubble of the ancient world. You see a group of tabulari, or record keepers, scurrying past with wooden tablets, while nearby a circle of men is huddled around a clandestine news sheet. You overhear a rumor that the price of Egyptian wheat is going to triple because of a late Nile flood, and another guy claiming he saw a three-headed calf born in the Subura. Historians actually debate how much of the news in the forum was fake news, designed to manipulate the stock market or incite a political protest. But for a teenager like you, it's better than any social media feed. You're learning who is in favor, who is about to be exiled, and who just bought a villa in Pompeii with money they definitely didn't have last month. You notice a crowd gathering near the temple of Castor and Pollux. A senator is making his way through the press, preceded by his nomenclator, a slave whose entire job is to whisper the names of the people approaching so the senator can pretend to remember them. Greetings, Gaius. How is your gout? The senator booms, while the slave frantically checks a mental list. It's a hilarious performance of ancient PR. You catch a glimpse of the man's face. He looks exhausted, his toga meticulously pleated, but his eyes red-rimmed from too many late-night banquets. It's a reminder that even at the top of the food chain, Rome is a grind. You move away as the crowd gets too thick, dodging a group of lawyers who are arguing so loudly you can hear their spit hitting the pavement. One of the weirdest facts about the Forum is that it was originally a swamp. Before the Great Sewer, the Cloaca Maxima, was built, this whole area was a muddy mess where people buried their dead. Now, you're standing on top of centuries of history, literally. You can feel the heat radiating off the stone pavers, a reminder of why the wealthy Romans flee to their country villas in August. You find a slightly quieter corner near the Curia, the Senate House. Through the open doors, you can see the silhouettes of the most powerful men in the world, sitting on their folding ivory stools. It looks incredibly boring, which is perhaps the most realistic thing about government in any era. As a teenager, you're mostly here to observe and learn the cursus honorum, the ladder of political offices. But your attention is quickly diverted by a street performer, a man with a trained monkey dressed like a miniature legionnaire. The monkey is doing a surprisingly accurate impression of a centurion's march, and the crowd is roaring with laughter. This is the duality of Rome. One minute you're standing in the shadow of a temple that defines Western law, and the next you're watching a monkey in a helmet. You toss a small copper coin into the performer's hat, feeling a sudden, sharp pang of nostalgia for a simpler time when you didn't have to worry about your future career in the civil service. The sun begins its slow descent, casting long, dramatic shadows across the Forum. The white marble starts to turn a soft, dusty rose color, and the noise levels drop just a fraction. You realize that the Forum isn't just a place of business, it's a cathedral of Roman identity. Every statue you pass of generals, of gods, of mythical founders is watching you. It's a bit claustrophobic, to be honest. You feel the weight of 1,000 years of expectations pressing down on your shoulders, heavier even than your toga. You take a deep breath, the air tasting of dust and incense from a nearby altar where a priest is burning bay leaves. You start to head toward the exit, passing the Miliarium Aureum, the golden milestone, which supposedly marks the point where all roads in the Empire meet. You look at the distances inscribed on the bronze and think about the places you'll probably never see: Londinium, Carthage, the dark forests of Germania. You're a kid at the center of the world, but the world feels vast and terrifyingly large. A group of wealthy youths, perhaps a few years older than you, ride past on fine horses, their tunics embroidered with gold thread. They don't even look at you, but you watch them go, wondering if that's the life you're supposed to want. The transition from the grand forum back into the narrow, winding side streets is jarring. Suddenly, the marble disappears, replaced by soot-stained brick and peeling plaster. But as you walk, you carry a little bit of that forum energy with you, a sense that you are part of something massive, something eternal, even if you're just a kid who's currently wondering if the baker down the street has any leftover buns. The light is fading now, and the first evening lamps are being lit in the windows of the wealthier houses. You pick up your pace, the rhythm of your sandals on the stones echoing the pulse of the city as it prepares for its evening transformation. As you leave the grandeur of the forum behind, the reality of your afternoon internship begins to set in. And frankly, your nose is the first to protest. You're heading toward the Phallonica, or the Roman laundry and dye works, where you've been tasked with helping out for a few hours. Now, if you're picturing a modern laundromat with the scent of spring meadow and mountain fresh, you are in for a very rude, very pungent awakening. In ancient Rome, the primary cleaning agent for wool wasn't soap, it was ammonia. And where did they get that ammonia? From large jars placed on street corners for passersby to contribute to. Yes, you are currently walking toward a workplace where the secret ingredient is aged human urine. It's one of those historical truths that makes you realize why the Romans were so obsessed with perfume. You step inside the workshop, and the air is so thick with the smell of ammonia and damp wool that it feels like it has a physical weight. Your job today isn't particularly glamorous. You see several large clay vats set into the floor, and in each one, a worker is standing waist deep in a mixture of water and the secret ingredient, literally jumping and treading on the clothes like they're crushing grapes for a very disgusting wine. This was known as fulling, and it was the only way to get the natural oils and stubborn Roman dirt out of heavy tunics. You're assigned to the rinsing station, which is slightly better, but your hands are still going to smell like a chemistry lab explosion for the next 3 days. At least it's honest work, you tell yourself, though your watering eyes suggest otherwise. Historians still debate the exact economic impact of these fulling shops, but they were essentially the industrial powerhouses of the city. Every toga you saw, looking pristine in the forum, likely passed through a vat of donated liquid in the feet of a tired teenager. As you work, you chat with an older worker named Cyrus, a freedman who has been doing this for 20 years. He jokes that after 2 decades, his nose has simply retired from service and he can't smell a thing, which he considers a superpower. He tells you stories about the purple trade, explaining how the most expensive dyes come from tiny sea snails called murex. It takes thousands of snails to dye just the hem of a single senatorial toga, making it more valuable than its weight in gold. You spend the next few hours wringing out heavy, waterlogged wool. Your muscles ache, and you find yourself wondering why the Romans didn't spend a little more time inventing a washing machine and a little less time inventing new ways to catapult rocks at Gauls. There's a certain rhythm to the work, though. A splash, a grunt, the heavy thud-thud of the fullers in their vats. It's a side of Rome that the poets rarely write about. While Virgil was busy composing dactylic hexameter about the founding of the city, someone had to make sure his socks weren't filthy. You realize that the glory of Rome is built on a foundation of very smelly, very hardworking people just like you. Every now and then, a wealthy client's slave comes in to drop off a garment or haggle over a price. They hold a scented handkerchief to their nose, looking at you and the other workers with a mixture of pity and disgust. You find a strange sense of pride in that. You're the one doing the dirty work that keeps the empire looking sharp. You think back to the toga you struggled with this morning. Remember that feeling of itchy wool? Now you know exactly why it's so stiff. It's been beaten, soaked, and dried in the sun until it's practically a suit of armor. As the shift nears its end, you help hang the wet clothes on wooden frames. One of the weirder facts about Roman laundry is that they often used fuller's earth, a type of clay, to help whiten the fabric and absorb the grease. You're covered in a fine white dust that mixes with the sweat on your brow, making you look like a poorly made ghost. Cyrus hands you a couple of copper denarii, your pay for the day. It's not much, just enough for a decent dinner and maybe a small treat, but the weight of the coins in your hand feels significant. You've traded your afternoon for the upkeep of the city's vanity, and in a weird way, it feels like a fair deal. You step back out into the street, and even the smell of the Roman gutters feels like fresh mountain air compared to the Follonica. You scrub your hands at a nearby fountain, but the scent lingers, a stubborn reminder of your labor. You see a group of your peers walking toward the theater, laughing and looking pristine in their clean clothes, and you wonder if they have any idea what it took to get them that way. Probably not. But as a Roman teen, you're learning that the city is a machine with many gears, and today you were one of the most essential and most aromatic ones. The sun is lower now, painting the tops of the buildings in shades of orange and deep red. Your back is sore and your feet are tired, but there's a satisfying hum of exhaustion in your limbs. You decide to take the long way home, passing by the great library. You need a bit of quiet and a lot of distance from anything involving a vat. The transition from the industrial grime of the Follonica to the intellectual silence of the library is one of those sharp turns that only a city like Rome can provide. You tuck your coins into your belt, straighten your dusty tunic, and start walking, your shadow stretching out before you like a long, dark road into the future. You leave the industrial pungency of the Follonica behind, moving toward the grand, silent halls of the library. It's a transition that feels like stepping out of a thunderstorm and into a warm, still room. The library is part of a larger complex, perhaps the one built by Octavia or the great public library in the Forum of Trajan. As you walk through the massive bronze doors, the noise of the city, the shouting, the clattering carts, the incessant rhythm of Roman life, is swallowed by thick marble walls and the scent of aged parchment. Here, the air doesn't smell like ammonia or street food. It smells like cedarwood and dry, sun-warmed dust. It's the kind of quiet that makes you want to walk on your tiptoes, even though your hobnailed sandals have other plans. You find a spot in one of the wooden niches. Unlike a modern library with its rows of bound books, the walls here are lined with armaria, large cupboards filled with thousands of papyrus scrolls. Each scroll has a little parchment tag, or syllabus, hanging from its end, listing the title and author. You're looking for something specific, maybe a travelogue about the mysterious lands of the East, but you find yourself distracted by a scroll of Herodotus. You carefully slide it out, feeling the slightly rough, fibrous texture of the papyrus against your fingertips. It's a fragile thing, a long ribbon of Egyptian reed that holds the thoughts of a man who died hundreds of years before you were born. Historians actually debate how many people had access to these libraries, but in the heart of Rome, knowledge was surprisingly public, at least for those who could read. You unroll the scroll slowly, using both hands, your left hand rolling as your right hand unrolls, a delicate dance that requires more coordination than you'd think. You read about a land where ants are the size of foxes, and gold is dug out of the earth by giant furry creatures. You smile to yourself. Even as a teenager in the first century, you know a tall tale when you see one. But that's the magic of this place. It's a window into a world that is far larger than the 14 regions of Rome. The library is nearly empty, save for a few elderly scholars who look like they've been sitting in their respective corners since the Republic fell. One of them is muttering to himself in Greek, his finger tracing lines on a map that looks like a tangled web of ink. You look over at a large map of the Orbis Terrarum, the world, painted on a nearby wall. It's a fascinating, distorted view of reality. Italy is huge, shaped like a sturdy boot kicking the Mediterranean, while the rest of the world seems to fade into vague, terrifying edges labeled Land of the Cynocephali, Dog-Headed People, or simply Here Be Lions. It's a reminder that even for the most powerful empire on Earth, the horizon is still a place of mystery and monsters. You realize that your wax tablet from this morning feels heavy in your belt, a crude tool compared to these elegant scrolls. You think about the scribes, usually highly trained slaves, who spend their entire lives in scriptoriums, their eyes straining in the dim light to copy these texts letter by letter. There are no printing presses here. Every single word in this room was written by a human hand. If a scribe gets bored and skips a paragraph, that knowledge might be lost forever to future generations. It's a fragile way to keep a civilization running, but it's all you have. You find a strange, quiet comfort in the scratch of a distant quill and the occasional rustle of papyrus, a lo-fi ASMR soundtrack for your afternoon rest. A fun little fact, Romans didn't use spaces between words in their writing. It was called scriptio continua. Imagine trying to read a long-winded philosophy book where everything looks like this and you have to figure out where each word ends. It's a mental workout that would make a modern brain skip a beat. But for you, it's just how language works. You spend a good 20 minutes trying to decipher a particularly cramped poem by Catullus, realizing that Roman teenagers were just as obsessed with unrequited love and dramatic heartbreak as anyone today. Some things, it seems, are more eternal than the city itself. As the light begins to shift, filtering through the high clerestory windows and long slanted beams of gold, you feel the exhaustion from the laundry work finally catching up to you. Your eyes grow heavy. The silence of the library is a powerful sedative. You lean your head back against the cool marble of the niche, the scroll still resting in your lap. You think about the millions of words surrounding you, the laws, the lies, the poems, and the histories. You're just one small person in a vast sea of stories, a single character in a script that is still being written. Suddenly, a librarian, a stern-looking man with a very sharp-looking stylus tucked behind his ear, clears his throat loudly. You jump, nearly dropping the precious Herodotus scroll. He gives you a look that says, "This is a place for learning, not for napping." And you quickly begin the process of rolling the papyrus back up. You have to be careful. If you roll it too tight, the dry fibers can crack. You slide it back into its pigeonhole, ensuring the tag is visible, and give the librarian a sheepish nod. It's time to head back out. The world of dreams will have to wait until you're safely tucked into your straw mattress tonight. Walking out of the library is like being hit by a physical force. The noise of the street returns in a deafening wave. A butcher is shouting at a customer. A group of kids is playing a noisy game of ball, and the smell of roasting meat from a nearby stall makes your mouth water. You take a deep breath of the chaotic, dusty air, feeling the energy of the city, jumpstart your senses again. You've had your moment of quiet reflection, your brief escape into the minds of the ancients. Now, the modern world of first century Rome is calling you back, and you have a very important appointment with a very smelly, very delicious bowl of fish sauce-laden street food. As you step away from the library's dignified silence, your stomach decides to stage a full-scale rebellion. It's mid-afternoon, the time when the Roman sun turns the streets into a giant clay oven, and the only thing more persistent than the heat is the scent of garum wafting from a nearby stall. You find yourself standing before a popina, a lower-class tavern that's a bit seedier than the morning's deli. This is where the real Rome eats: laborers, sailors, and teenagers like you who have a few coins and a daring palate. You order a bowl of porridge, pulse, which sounds boring until the vendor douses it in a generous ladle of that famous fermented fish sauce. Now let's talk about garum. If you think modern fish sauce is strong, Roman garum was on a completely different level. It was made by layering fish innards and small whole fish with salt and aromatic herbs in massive stone vats, then letting it sit in the sun for months until it liquefied into a clear amber juice. Historians still debate exactly how stinky the Roman streets were, but considering garum factories were legally required to be located outside city walls because of the stench, you can imagine the aroma of your lunch. You take a bite, and the explosion of salty umami funk is so intense it practically makes your ears ring. It's the ketchup of the ancient world. Romans put it on everything from boiled eggs to honeyed pears. You sit on a stone bollard to eat, watching a group of merchants argue over a crate of spices. One of the weirdest facts about Roman dining is that they didn't have potatoes, tomatoes, or chili peppers. Those are all New World foods that won't arrive for another 1,500 years. Instead, your spicy kick comes from a heavy hand of black pepper imported all the way from India, which makes it incredibly expensive. You're essentially eating a bowl of liquid gold and fermented guts. You notice a small fly hovering over your bowl and realize that in Rome you don't fight nature, you just negotiate with it. You swat the fly away, take a swig of watered down wine, and feel a strange sense of satisfaction. The papina is buzzing with gossip. You hear a man in a tattered tunic talking about a haunted house in the Esquiline district where the ghost of a gladiator supposedly rattles his chains every Tuesday. Another woman is complaining that the local baker is mixing chalk into the flour to save money. This is the dark web of the first century, a constant stream of unverified, slightly paranoid, and highly entertaining information. You realize that while the senators are busy discussing the Pax Romana, the people on the street are just trying to figure out if their bread is 20% limestone. As you finish your meal, you use a piece of crust to swipe the last salty drops of garum from the bottom of your terracotta bowl. Your thirst is now monumental. You head back to the public fountain, but this time you notice a group of aquari, slaves who maintain the city's water pipes, digging up a lead pipe nearby. They're covered in mud and looking thoroughly miserable. It occurs to you that for every beautiful marble monument in this city, there's a labyrinth of pipes, sewers, and sweaty people keeping it from falling apart. You drink your fill of the limestone-heavy water, ignoring the slight metallic aftertaste. A group of travelers passes by, their mules laden with amphorae of wine from Gaul. You catch the eye of a boy your age leading one of the animals. He looks exhausted, his skin caked in the dust of the Appian Way. For a second, you feel a surge of gratitude that your hard day only involved some laundry and a long walk. In Rome, the distance between a comfortable life and a life of brutal toil is often just the luck of who your father happens to be. You give the traveler a small nod of solidarity, but he's already focused on navigating a particularly stubborn puddle of mud. The sun is starting to lose its aggressive edge, shifting the colors of the city from blinding white to a hazy golden ochre. You feel the garum sitting heavy in your stomach, a salty anchor for your afternoon adventures. You know that the next stop on your itinerary is the Colosseum, and you'll need all the energy you can get to survive the crowds and the noise of the games. You toss your empty bowl to the vendor, who catches it with a practiced hand and a toothless grin, and set off. Your sandals feel a bit heavier now, but the rhythm of the city keeps you moving. You are a Roman teenager, fueled by fermented fish and curiosity, and the greatest show on earth is about to begin. The roar of the crowd reaches you long before the massive stone walls of the Flavian amphitheater, the Colosseum, even come into view. It's a low, vibrating hum that you can feel in the soles of your feet, a mixture of 50,000 voices screaming for blood, bread, and entertainment. As you approach, the sheer scale of the building makes you feel like an ant. You look up at the 3 levels of arches, each housing a larger-than-life marble statue that seems to gaze down at the swarming masses with cool, immortal indifference. You reach into the small pouch at your waist and pull out your tessera, a small piece of bone or baked clay that serves as your ticket. It's marked with a number that tells you exactly which of the 80 arched entrances you need to use. Entering the Colosseum is like being swallowed by a giant stone beast. The vaulted corridors are cool and dim, smelling of damp stone, expensive perfume from the wealthy seats, and the unmistakable wild scent of large predators kept in the cages below. You climb the steep travertine stairs, pushing past a man selling roasted chickpeas and another hawking gladiator sweat in tiny glass vials, which women supposedly use as a face cream. To be honest, the thought of rubbing the perspiration of a very tired, very unwashed fighter onto your skin makes you glad you're a teenage boy with simpler grooming habits. You finally reach your section, high up in the wooden bleachers where the commoners and teenagers sit, and the view takes your breath away. The arena floor below is covered in fresh yellow sand, arena being the Latin word for sand, designed to soak up the inevitable mess. Right now, it's not a fight. It's a venatio, or a wild animal hunt. You watch as a group of bestiari face off against a pair of leopards imported from the Atlas Mountains. The crowd erupts as one of the cats leaps onto a wooden prop designed to look like a desert oasis. Historians still debate exactly how many animals were killed in these games, with some records claiming thousands died in a single festival. It's a spectacle of Roman dominance over nature, a way for the city to say that even the most ferocious beasts of the wild are subject to the emperor's whim. You find a spot on the hard wooden bench next to a guy who's wearing a headband in the colors of the Blues, one of the major chariot racing factions. Even though you're at the gladiator games, everyone in Rome is a fan of the races at the Circus Maximus, and the rivalry is intense. He's grumbling that the Greens cheated in the last race by bribing a charioteer to take a dive. You nod along, but your eyes are fixed on the arena floor. The sun is beating down on the crowd, but thankfully, the Valerium, a massive canvas awning operated by a specialized unit of the Roman Navy, is being unfurled overhead to provide shade. It's a marvel of engineering, a giant shadow creeping across the stadium like a cooling hand. Between the bouts, the atmosphere is surprisingly casual. People are eating, drinking wine, and placing bets with bookies who weave through the stands. You notice a group of young men a few rows down playing a game of heads or ships, the Roman version of heads or tails. The coins have a head of Janus on one side and the prow of a galley on the other. It's a reminder that even in a place built for life and death drama, most of the people here are just looking for a way to kill an afternoon. You realize that for a Roman teen, the Colosseum isn't just a place of violence, it's a social club, a fashion show, and a rowdy classroom all rolled into one. One of the weirder, lesser known facts about the games is the merchandise. You see a vendor selling little clay figurines of the star gladiators, like the ancient version of action figures. There's a Threx with his curved sword and a Retiarius with his net and trident. You think about the men down there. Most are slaves or criminals, but some are celebrities with fan clubs and poems written about them. It's a strange, precarious kind of fame. You wonder if they ever look up at the thousands of faces in the stands and feel the same sense of crushing scale that you do. The noise reaches a fever pitch as the midday executions begin. This is the part where many people head out to grab a snack, as it's considered the filler content of the day. You stay, though your stomach does a little flip that has nothing to do with the garum you ate earlier. You watch as the stagehands use elaborate trapdoors and lifts, powered by hundreds of slaves in the basement, to make scenery appear out of thin air. A forest grows from the floor in seconds, a testament to the fact that Romans were obsessed with special effects long before Hollywood existed. You find yourself more impressed by the machinery than the spectacle itself, wondering how the pulleys and counterweights manage to work so seamlessly. As the sun begins to dip lower, the main events, the true gladiator pairings, are announced by a herald with a voice like a trumpet. The crowd falls into a rare, expectant silence. You lean forward, your elbows on your knees, watching the sunlight glint off the polished bronze helmets of the fighters as they enter the arena. They salute the emperor's box, their voices lost in the sudden roar of the mob. You feel the adrenaline surging through the stadium, a collective heartbeat shared by 50,000 people. It's intoxicating and terrifying at the same time. But as the first clash of steel on steel rings out, you find your mind wandering. You look at the shadows stretching across the sand and think about the quiet library from earlier. You think about your bed back in the insula. The excitement is real, but so is the exhaustion. You've been on your feet for 10 hours, and the roar of the crowd is starting to feel like a headache. You decide to leave before the final bout finishes, hoping to beat the rush to the exits. You slip out of your row, navigating the sea of tunics and togas, the screams of the stadium fading into a dull, rhythmic thud behind you. You're ready for a different kind of ritual now, the steam and the silence of the public baths. After the sensory overload of the Colosseum, you find yourself craving a different kind of intensity, the thick, humid embrace of the public baths. You head toward the baths of Trajan, a massive complex that looks more like a marble fortress than a place to get clean. In Rome, the baths aren't just for hygiene, They are the city's living room, gym, and office space all rolled into one. As you enter, you pay your 1 quadrans, the smallest copper coin in circulation, roughly the price of a single piece of bad fruit, and step into the changing room, the paterfamilias. You see rows of stone niches where people have shoved their tunics and sandals, and you do the same, though you keep a nervous eye on a shady-looking guy nearby. Bathhouse thieves are so common that stealing clothes while someone is in the pool is practically a professional sport in Rome. Once you're down to your basic loincloth, you head into the palestra, the open-air exercise yard. Here, the air is a chaotic mix of shouting and the rhythmic thud of medicine balls. You see men wrestling in pits of sand, others playing a fast-paced game of harpastum with a small hard ball, and a few older gentlemen just puffing and blowing as they try to touch their toes. You join a group of teens for a few minutes of ball tossing, feeling the sweat start to bead on your skin. It's a strange, democratic space. You might be rubbing shoulders with a wealthy merchant or a humble baker, and since everyone is mostly naked, the usual social markers of the toga are gone. Now, let's talk about the Roman version of showering, because it's nothing like what you're used to. Romans didn't have soap. Instead, you head to a corner where a slave slathers your skin in cheap olive oil until you're as slippery as a seal. Then comes the strigil, a curved metal tool that looks like a blunt sickle. The slave, or a friend if you're budget conscious, scrapes the oil, sweat, and street dust off your body in long, satisfying strokes. Historians have actually analyzed the strigil scrapings found in ancient drains, and let's just say the results are a fascinating, if slightly nauseating, cocktail of human DNA and ancient grime. You look at the gray sludge being scraped off your arm and feel a weird sense of accomplishment. You're literally peeling off the day's labor. You move through the rooms in a specific temperature-controlled order. First is the tepidarium, a warm, vaulted hall where you sit on marble benches just to let your pores open. The walls are covered in intricate mosaics of sea monsters and nymphs, and the acoustics are incredible. You can hear a guy 3 benches over whispering a secret about a grain shipment, and it sounds like he's standing right next to you. This is where the real social networking happens. You overhear 2 men discussing the latest philosophy from the Stoics, while another group argues about which gladiator had the best footwork in the arena earlier. It's a low-energy hum of conversation that feels like a warm blanket for your brain. Next, you brave the calidarium, the hot room. It's basically a massive steam chamber, and the heat is supplied by a hypocaust system, an ingenious basement furnace where slaves stoke fires to send hot air through gaps in the floors and walls. The floor is so hot, you have to wear thick wooden sandals just to keep your soles from blistering. It's a humid, heavy heat that makes it hard to breathe, but wonderful for your sore muscles. You sit in a large communal tub of hot water, the steam rising in thick clouds that obscure the faces around you. You close your eyes, letting the heat soak into your bones, feeling the tension from the laundry work and the school day finally melt away. A fun, slightly frantic fact. Because of the way the air circulated in these baths, the noise was legendary. The philosopher Seneca once lived above a bathhouse and complained about the clatter of hair pluckers and the shrieks of people being pummeled by masseurs. You hear a sudden splash and a loud oof as someone dives into the cold pool, followed by a chorus of laughter. It's a symphony of human sounds, splashes, slaps, shouts, and the occasional off-key singing. It's not relaxing in the modern sense of a quiet spa, but it's deeply communal. You feel like a single cell in a giant warm, splashing organism. Finally, you finish with the frigidarium, the cold plunge. You take a deep breath and dive into the icy water. The shock is instantaneous, a literal reset button for your nervous system. Your skin tingles, your heart races, and suddenly you feel more alive than you have all day. You climb out, shivering slightly, and dry off with a coarse linen towel. You head back to the changing room, and, miracle of miracles, your tunic and sandals are still there. You dress slowly, feeling clean in a way that goes deeper than just skin. The layer of Roman grit is gone, replaced by a faint scent of oil and the lingering warmth of the steam. As you walk out of the baths, the evening air feels crisp and sweet against your damp skin. The sun has almost completely disappeared, leaving the sky a bruised purple and deep indigo. You feel lighter, both in body and spirit. The city is transitioning into its nighttime persona, and the shadows are growing long, long, and mysterious. You start the walk home, your pace more relaxed now, your mind drifting through the events of the day like a leaf on the Tiber. You've been schooled, dressed, fed, entertained, and scrubbed clean. You are ready for the final act of your Roman day, but first, you have to navigate the winding, darkening streets of a city that never truly sleeps. To escape the lingering humidity of the baths, you decide to take a detour through the lush gardens of a palatial villa on the Celian Hill. Technically, you aren't supposed to be here, but the wealthy owners are currently away at their seaside retreat in Baiae, and the gatekeeper is a friend of your cousin's who owes him a favor. You slip through the side entrance, and suddenly the frantic energy of Rome simply vanishes. It's as if someone pulled a curtain over the city's mouth. This is a hortus, a Roman garden, and it's a masterclass in controlled nature. Instead of wild forests, you see perfectly manicured boxwood hedges clipped into the shapes of geometric patterns and mythical animals, a practice called topiaria that the Romans turned into a high art form. You walk along a path made of crushed white marble that glows like a ribbon of fallen stars in the twilight. The air here is a cooling tonic, scented with rosemary, bay laurel, and the sweet, heavy perfume of lilies. You find a stone bench near a nymphaeum, a monumental fountain dedicated to the water nymphs. The water doesn't just splash, it trickles down a series of marble steps, creating a melodic, bubbling rhythm that masks the distant sound of a tavern brawl 3 blocks away. Historians often point out that for the Roman elite, these gardens weren't just for show. They were soul medicine, a way to recreate the idealized rural life within the walls of a concrete jungle. You lean back, watching a small green lizard freeze on a statue of Apollo, and for a moment, you feel like the richest person in the empire. One of the most impressive things about this garden is the engineering you can't see. Beneath your feet, a hidden network of lead pipes and terracotta channels ensures that every plant is hydrated and every fountain remains pressurized. You notice a row of fruit trees, cherries, peaches, and apricots, which are relatively new additions to the Roman diet, brought back by generals from campaigns in the east. It's a literal edible map of the empire's expansion. You consider borrowing a low-hanging peach, but then you remember the stories about the villa's guard dogs, which are bred to be about as friendly as a hungry crocodile. You decide to stick to breathing the expensive air instead. The silence here is punctuated by the occasional clack of a gardener's shears or the distant call of a peacock, an exotic pet that Romans kept to show off their status and occasionally to serve at dinner parties. You notice a sundial or solarium carved into a marble pillar. The shadow is long and thin, stretching toward the 8th hour, reminding you that your temporary sanctuary is about to be reclaimed by the night. You wonder what it would be like to live here every day, to wake up to the smell of jasmine instead of the smell of your neighbor's laundry. But then you realize that even this piece is a product of labor. Somewhere in the back of the estate, dozens of slaves are working around the clock to make sure not a single leaf is out of place. A fun, slightly eerie fact about Roman gardens is that they were often filled with ocelli, little marble masks or discs carved with the faces of Bacchus or Silenus, hung from the trees so they would swing in the breeze. As the wind picks up, you see them swaying, their stone eyes appearing to blink as they catch the fading light. They're meant to bring good luck and fertility to the soil, but in the gloaming, they look like a gallery of ghosts watching over the roses. You give a respectful nod to a bust of a long-dead ancestor perched on a pedestal, feeling that strange Roman connection between the living, the dead, and the land. You find yourself standing by a small pond filled with mullets, a type of fish that some Romans became so obsessed with they would actually train them to come when called, or even dress them in tiny earrings. Yes, really. The historian Pliny the Elder once wrote about a man who wept more for the death of his favorite pet fish than for the death of his own daughters. You look at the dark shapes darting through the water and wonder if they're waiting for a snack or a jewelry fitting. It's these weird, eccentric details of the wealthy that make you realize that while life is hard for you, it's delightfully bizarre for them. The sky is now a deep, velvety indigo, and the first few stars are beginning to puncture the canopy of the cypress trees. The shadows of the hedges look like huddling giants. You know it's time to leave before the gatekeeper's shift ends, and you're forced to explain your presence to a less friendly guard. You stand up, feeling the cool dampness of the evening dew on your skin, a stark contrast to the parched dust of the forum. You take one last deep breath of the rosemary-scented air, trying to store it in your lungs like a treasure for the walk back to your crowded insula. As you slip back through the side gate and return to the cobblestones of the public street, the transition is like a slap in the face. The noise, the heat, and the grit return instantly. But you walk with a slightly more graceful stride, your mind still lingering in the green shadows of the villa. You've seen the pinnacle of Roman relaxation, the quiet luxury that the empire's gold can buy. Now you're heading back to the reality of the masses, moving toward the flickering lamps and the rising chaos of the Roman night. As you descend from the quiet hills and back into the labyrinthine alleys of the neighborhood, the sophisticated silence of the gardens is replaced by the clatter of a different kind of ritual, the evening street games. You come across a group of your friends huddled in a circle under the flickering glow of a lamp outside a bakery. They aren't debating politics or philosophy. They are intensely focused on a game of astragali, or knuckle knocks. These are small bones taken from the feet of sheep or goats, polished until they shine like ivory. Each of the four sides of the bone has a different value, and the goal is to throw them into the air and catch as many as possible on the back of your hand, or to roll them like dice to achieve the Venus throw, the highest possible combination. You join them, squatting on the cool cobblestones. Your fingers are still a bit stiff from the laundry work, but the muscle memory kicks in. There's a specialized language to these games, a shorthand of insults and cheers that has probably remained unchanged since the days of the first kings. Historians actually find these knuckle knocks in graves all across the empire, from the borders of Scotland to the edge of the Sahara, proving that no matter where you were, being a bored teenager meant finding clever ways to gamble with bits of bone. You toss the bones, the dry click-clack sound echoing against the stone walls, a rhythmic, percussive soundtrack to the Roman twilight. The stakes are low, mostly just copper nuts or small pebbles, but the tension is real. You notice one of your friends, Lucius, is trying to use a weighted bone, and you call him out with a laugh. This is the Roman spirit, a mix of fierce competition and a healthy suspicion of your neighbor. Between rounds, you talk about the mundane things that make up a teenager's life. You discuss which tavern has the least watered-down wine, which teacher is the most likely to fall asleep during a lecture, and whether the rumors are true that the emperor is planning to hand out free grain tomorrow to celebrate a minor anniversary. It's a moment of pure, unscripted connection, away from the watchful eyes of parents or the heavy expectations of the state. If you grew tired of knuckle knocks, there was always ludus duodecim scriptorum, or the game of 12 lines, which is a distant ancestor of backgammon. You see two older men playing it on a board carved directly into the steps of a nearby temple. They move their circular glass pieces with a focus that they've forgotten the world around them exists. It's a reminder that in a city with no electricity and no digital screens, entertainment was something you had to find in the palm of your hand or the cracks in the pavement. You realize that these games are the connective tissue of the city, bringing people together in the flickering shadows. A fun little fact: Roman children were so obsessed with games that they even had pet insects. You see a younger boy nearby with a beetle tied to a very thin thread, watching it fly in circles. It sounds a bit cruel to modern ears, but for a Roman kid, it was basically a living kite. You watch the beetle for a moment, its wings iridescent in the lamplight, and feel that familiar pang of transition. You aren't a child anymore. The bulla around your neck feels heavier than usual, but you aren't quite a man either. You're in that strange, shadowy middle ground, just like the time of day you're currently in. The game breaks up as the wind begins to whistle through the narrow passages, carrying the scent of rain and distant wood smoke. You pocket your knuckle knocks, feeling their smooth, familiar weight against your thigh. One of your friends mentions that the night watch, the vigils, will be passing through soon, and they aren't known for their sense of humor when it comes to groups of teenagers loitering after dark. You say your goodbyes, the familiar veil echoing down the street. The camaraderie of the game lingers, a warm glow that helps push back the encroaching chill of the evening. As you walk away, you look back at the empty circle on the pavement where you were just sitting. In a few hundred years, those same stones might be buried under meters of dirt, but the memory of the game, the laughter, the cheating, the simple joy of a lucky throw, feels like something that can't be buried. You're moving slower now, your body finally admitting that it's exhausted. The rhythmic clink of the bones in your pouch acts as a metronome for your steps as you head toward the final stretch of your journey. Home. You finally climb the 4 flights of stairs back to your family's apartment, your legs feeling like lead weights. The smell of the insula at night is different, less like the bustling dust of the day, and more like a heavy blanket of charcoal smoke and cooking fat. Inside, your family is gathered around a small, low table. There are no chairs here. Instead, you lie down on a wooden couch, propping yourself up on your left elbow. This is the Roman way to dine. And while it looks like the ultimate lazy luxury, after 10 minutes your elbow starts to throb and you realize why Roman teenagers are perpetually restless. Your mother has prepared a special meal tonight, which in Rome means she's found something at the market that wasn't strictly porridge. The centerpiece is a platter of dormice gliss, which have been raised in special clay jars called glyria and fattened up on a diet of walnuts and acorns. They are roasted and glazed with honey and poppy seeds. You pick one up. It's essentially a tiny, sweet, crunchy drumstick. Historians actually point out that dormice were such a popular delicacy that the Roman Senate once tried to ban them to curb excessive luxury, but Romans loved their honeyed rodents far too much to listen to a bunch of guys in togas. Next to the dormice is a bowl of moratum, a herbal cheese spread made with so much garlic and vinegar that it could probably ward off not just evil spirits, but your neighbors for 3 blocks. You spread it on a thick slice of spelt bread, the sharp flavors cutting through the heavy sweetness of the meat. As you eat, your father begins his nightly ritual of complaining about the state of the world. He's upset about the price of a nona, the grain dole, and convinced that the new aqueduct project is just a way for the contractors to embezzle sestertii. You listen with half an ear, the familiar rhythm of his grumbling acting like a white noise machine. You tell him about the Phalonica and the coins you earned, and he gives you a rare, brief nod of approval. In a Roman household, the paterfamilias has absolute power. Technically, your father has the legal right to sell you into slavery if he feels like it, but tonight he's just a tired man eating lentils and complaining about the government. It's a domestic scene that feels strangely fragile in a city of 1 million people. One of the weirder facts about Roman dining is their lack of silverware. You use your fingers for almost everything, which is why there's a slave, or in your case, a younger sibling, standing by with a bowl of scented water and a towel. There is a specific etiquette to eating with your hands. You're supposed to use only the tips of your fingers, and reaching into the communal bowl with your whole palm is considered a major social faux pas. You watch your younger brother try to sneak an extra honey date and get a sharp tap on the knuckles from your mother's wooden spoon. Some things about family dinners are truly universal across time. The room is lit by a single oil lamp, a small terracotta vessel that casts long, flickering shadows against the walls. The walls themselves are just thin partitions of lath and plaster, and you can hear the family next door having a very similar conversation about the price of eggs. In Rome, privacy is a luxury you can't afford. You find yourself staring into the small flame of the lamp, the smell of burning olive oil mixing with the scent of the garlic cheese. It's a warm, enclosed world, a tiny island of family in the middle of the vast, uncaring ocean of the city. You feel the weight of the day's experiences, the school, the forum, the games, the baths, all settling into a quiet pile in the back of your mind. For dessert, there are savolum, which are basically Roman cheesecakes made with flour, honey, and fresh cheese, baked on top of bay leaves to give them a floral aroma. They are incredibly heavy, the kind of food that makes you want to go to sleep immediately. You take a final sip of pasca, a drink made of water and sour wine or vinegar, which was the standard beverage for soldiers and laborers because it was safer to drink than plain water and gave you a little boost of energy. You realize that your life is built on these small, practical solutions to the problems of living in a pre-industrial world. As the meal winds down, the conversation turns to the ancestors. Your father points to the small household altar, the lararium, where little bronze figures of the lares, the spirits of the home, stand. You say a quick prayer of thanks for the day, a small ritual that links you to the generations of people who have lived and died in this same valley. It's a grounding thought. You aren't just a kid in a crowded apartment. You are a link in a chain. The flickering lamp starts to sputter, signaling that the oil is running low. Your mother begins to clear the table, her movements slow and practiced. You stand up, feeling the stiffness in your back from the couch. The apartment is quiet now, the sounds of the street outside muffled by the thick evening air. You look out the small window one last time. Below, the city is a grid of shadows, with only a few torches moving like fireflies in the distance. You feel a deep, bone-weary sense of belonging. Tomorrow you'll have to do it all over again. The stairs, the school, the heat. And tonight, you've survived. You've been fed, you've been heard, and you are safe. You turn away from the window, moving toward the small corner of the room that serves as your bed, the smell of honey and bay leaves still clinging to your skin. You step back out onto the small balcony of your insula for one last breath of air before sleep, and the Rome you see now is a completely different beast than the one you navigated this morning. The sun is long gone, and in its place is a darkness so thick it feels like velvet. There are no streetlights in ancient Rome. If you want to move through the city at night, you carry a torch or a small clay oil lamp that flickers precariously in the wind, casting long, dancing shadows that make every alleyway look like the entrance to the underworld. It is a time of creatures and shadow dwellers. You see the vigils, the city's night watch and fire brigade, moving in a rhythmic line down the main thoroughfare, their brass helmets glinting in the light of their lanterns. They are the only thing standing between the city and a total descent into chaos. To be honest, as a teenager, wandering the streets of Rome at night is one of those things where you'd probably have a 50% chance of being mugged and a 50% chance of having a bucket of night soil dumped on your head from a third-story window. Historians often emphasize that the Roman night was a lawless frontier. You look down and see a group of wealthy young men, likely drunk on expensive Falernian wine, being escorted by a phalanx of slaves carrying heavy clubs. They are laughing loudly, their voices echoing off the stone walls. They don't need to fear the dark because they brought their own light and their own muscle. You, on the other hand, are quite happy to stay behind your locked wooden door. One of the weirdest and most terrifying parts of the Roman night was the sheer noise of the transport. Remember how I mentioned carts were banned during the day? Well, now is their time. The silence you expected is shattered by the thunderous rumble clack of hundreds of heavy wooden wagons hauling grain, building stone, and wine amphorae into the city center. It's a literal midnight rush hour. The sound bounces off the narrow buildings, creating a cacophony that makes the floorboards of your apartment vibrate. It's the industrial heartbeat of an empire that refuses to stop growing, even when its citizens are trying to get some shut-eye. You wonder how the emperor sleeps in his palace on the Palatine Hill, probably with a lot of heavy curtains and very expensive earplugs. You notice a small shrine at the street corner below, dedicated to the Lares Compitales, the gods of the crossroads. A lone figure stops for a moment, places a small garland of withered flowers on the altar, and then disappears into the shadows. In Rome, the night is a spiritual time. People believe the veil between the living and the dead is thinner when the sun goes down. You've heard stories of lemurs, ghosts of the restless dead, who wander the streets looking for a way back to the light. You feel a slight chill that has nothing to do with the evening breeze. You check the latch on your door one more time. It's just a simple iron bolt, but tonight, it feels like the most important piece of technology you own. A fun, slightly bizarre fact: because there were no house numbers in Rome, finding your way home in the dark was an art form. You didn't live at 123 Appian Way. You lived 3 doors past the bakery with the cracked stone across from the statue of the one-legged general. In the dark, these landmarks disappear. You realize that your entire mental map of the city is built on visual cues that the night has stolen. You watch a stray cat leap from one roof to another, its eyes glowing like tiny yellow embers. It's the true king of the Roman night, navigating the rooftops with an ease you'll never possess. The air begins to smell of damp earth and the cooling stone of the city. You hear the distant, rhythmic chanting of a group of priests moving toward a temple for a midnight ritual. The sound is haunting and beautiful, a reminder that Rome is a city of 1,000 gods, all of whom need to be kept happy even while the rest of the world sleeps. You feel a strange sense of insignificance, standing there on your high balcony. The city is so old, so vast, and so full of secrets that your little life as a teenager feels like a single drop of rain in the Tiber. But it's a comfortable insignificance. You are part of the machine, tucked away in your little gear slot for the night. You finally turn back inside, the flickering light of your own lamp casting a giant, distorted version of your shadow against the plastered wall. You blow out the flame, and for a second, the smell of burnt wick is the only thing in the universe. You feel your way to your straw mattress, the darkness so absolute you have to rely entirely on touch. The noise of the carts outside is still there, a constant low-frequency growl, but it's starting to blend into the background. You've navigated the dangers and the wonders of the Roman day, and you've made it back to your sanctuary. As you lie there, you think about the people in the other insulae, the soldiers at the gates, and the sailors on the river. Everyone is in their place, waiting for the sun to reset the clock. You feel the heavy, honeyed weight of the savolum cheesecake in your stomach and the lingering tingle of the cold bath on your skin. The Roman night is a predator, but tonight it has let you be. You close your eyes, the rhythm of the city's nocturnal transport acting like a strange mechanical lullaby. One more section to go, one last transition before the eternal part of the eternal city finally takes over your consciousness. You finally settle onto your straw mattress, the fibers crunching softly under your weight as you find that one elusive spot that doesn't poke through the linen. The long, exhausting journey of being a Roman teenager has reached its quiet conclusion. Your muscles, which were screaming after the trek to the Forum and the heavy labor at the Polonica, are now beginning to hum with a dull, satisfying ache. You pull a thin wool blanket up to your chin, feeling the slight chill of the Roman night air as it snakes through the gaps in the wooden shutters. The room is pitch black, but your mind is still illuminated by the vibrant, messy, and beautiful images of the day. You can still see the sun glinting off the gilded roof of the Temple of Jupiter and feel the spray of the fountain water against your dusty face. It's a strange thing, living in the center of the world. As you lie there, you realize that while the statues of the gods are made of cold marble, the city itself is made of people, millions of them, all dreaming and breathing just like you. Historians often debate if the Romans ever truly felt safe in these towering apartment blocks, but at this moment, tucked away in your corner of the Subura, you feel a profound sense of peace. You remember the nap strategist advice from the older men at the baths: breathe in the scent of the dried lavender tucked under your pillow, and let the rhythm of the city become your heart's metronome. The rumble of the heavy carts in the street below hasn't stopped, but it has softened into a rhythmic growl, a mechanical purr that tells you the world is still turning, even while you rest. One last little secret of the Roman night: many people believed that dreams were messages from the gods, delivered by Mercury as he flew over the rooftops with his winged sandals. You wonder what messages are waiting for you. Will you dream of the vast green gardens of the Celian Hill, or of the roar of the crowd at the Colosseum? Or maybe you'll dream of a future where being a teenager doesn't involve quite so much vinegar and wool. You find yourself smiling in the dark, thinking about the knuckle knocks in your pouch and the small victories of the day. You didn't trip in your toga, you earned a few coins, and you ate like a king, or at least like a very well-fed Roman. The darkness of the room feels thick and protective now, like a cocoon. The smells of the day, the sharp garum, The sweet honey, the smoky oil lamps, and the clean scent of the baths have all faded into a single neutral aroma of home. You feel your breathing slow down, matching the deep, quiet pulse of the apartment block. Outside, a lone dog barks at a passing shadow, then falls silent. The city of Rome, with all its temples, its filth, its glory, and its noise, is finally beginning to dim. The eternal city is settling into its nightly slumber, and you are drifting right along with it, a small, weary soul at the heart of an empire. The shadows on the wall have stopped moving. The distant shouting of the taverns has faded into a murmur. You feel the edges of your consciousness beginning to blur, the line between the hard straw mattress and the soft world of sleep disappearing. You are safe. You are home. You are a part of history, tucked away in the folds of time. The sun will rise again tomorrow over the 7 hills, and the chaos will begin anew, but for now the night belongs to you. The air in the room is still and cool. Your eyelids are too heavy to lift, even if you wanted to. You let go of the day, letting the memories of the forum and the library drift away like smoke from a dying fire. The rhythm of the carts is a distant echo now, a ghost of a sound. You are sinking into the deep, dark, peaceful waters of a Roman night. Everything is as it should be. The gods are watching, the watchmen are walking, and the city is breathing. Sleep now. Let the history of the world wait for the morning. You've done enough. You've seen enough. You've lived a whole lifetime in a single Roman day. Now let the silence take over. Let the dreams begin.